Hey guys, what's up? It's Rap again, back with more entitled neighbor stories. In today's video, an entitled neighbor vandalized my mailbox and then gets what he deserves. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the title story. The first one starts like this. My neighbor is the most generic jerk I've ever come across in my life. He is the male equivalent of a Karen in the sense that he thinks the world revolves around him, like he is the main character of everybody else's story. Like, I only exist to be his neighbor instead of my own person with a life that goes on when he is not around. Honestly, maybe he thinks he is some kind of TV show protagonist and that I am an extra or an NPC in some game. Now, one thing that he enjoys doing is constantly destroying my mailbox, which is located right at the front of my property. Right away, I know some of you might be getting ready to type that destroying a mailbox is a federal crime and I should have just called the cops on him. To save you all some time, I did not end up doing that, but I think you will enjoy what I did a little bit more. So first though, I want to tell you about how he destroyed my mailbox several times. Basically, he loves classic cars and owns several of them on his property. One that he drives all the time though is a 1968 Ford Torino GT, which I know is worth about $35,000 based on research. He loves this car and constantly mocks me for not being able to afford nice fancy cars like his. If I was super into cars, I probably could and would find the money to invest in them. I am just not a big car guy and use my money for other things. I drive a pretty basic car and for me, that's more than enough. However, back to my mailbox destruction, he has a tendency to hit it with his car and then run it over for good measure. I have even seen him flat out do it before and questioned why he even did it. The only kind of answer I ever got was him telling me that it was fun and that he could do whatever he wanted with his car. Like I said, he is basically a generic bully from an 80s movie and I have no idea why. Since asking him was clearly not gonna work, I decided to get a bit of revenge instead. See, I'm a mechanical engineer and messing with an engineer is a bad idea because we have a tendency to go overboard with things. If he was gonna act like his life was a weird TV show, then I was gonna join in and be just as over the top as him. So I set out to design a new mailbox that when he tried to run over would give him the surprise of his life. It took me a while to come up with how I wanted it done because at the end of the day it still had to be a functional mailbox. I could not really rig it to explode or something crazy that would end with people getting hurt or me going to jail. I also didn't want to do something like make it extra sturdy or strong where he might just dent the front of his car trying to hit it. I played around with that idea a little bit, but it just didn't feel satisfying enough. Finally, I settled on doing something to the part of the mailbox that nobody would see, the part that would end up buried under the ground. So instead of a simple stake, I designed a kind of ball that I would attach to the base of the mailbox, and on that ball I would put steel spikes that could do some major damage. I don't want to go into details of the exact build or how I did it because I honestly worry about other people doing this and somehow me getting into trouble for it. I'm just gonna skip to my new mailbox being placed in the ground and waiting for my neighbor to make his move. There was never a pattern or reason for when he would run it over, instead I just had to wait until he got bored enough. It only took a couple of weeks though and I heard a crash outside and then a slew of cursing. I knew exactly what happened before I even looked out the window and rushed to go outside in excitement that my design actually worked. Obviously, there was no testing phase, so it was really just a guess if it would have done anything. So my neighbor was standing outside of his car screaming at the top of his lungs. The spikes from the ball were lodged into both of his front tires and I would assume damaged the pipe underneath the car. Since there was something leaking out of it, it was not even part of the plan, but I guess the shape plus how he hit the mailbox caused it to bounce back up or swing or something, because instead of just going to the ground, it managed to smash his entire windshield. Neighbor, what the F did you do to my car? Me, what are you talking about? I was just inside minding my own business. Did you have a little accident with the car? He knew that I was being sarcastic and passive-aggressive, but I did not care. He deserved this, and I was not gonna even act like I didn't do this on purpose. Neighbor, you wrecked your mailbox or something. Do you have any idea how hard it is going to be to fix this car? It's not some piece of crap like yours that can just use any old parts from the scrapyard. This thing is classic and you ruined it. Me, maybe you should have decided destroying mailboxes with something so important was a good idea. If you kept the car on the road and off my lawn, then you would have never have hit it. Neighbor, you won't be so cocky when I call the cops and show them you created a weapon. They'll throw you in jail and I will sue you for everything you own. Me? Sure, you can call the police. They'll wanna know why you had my mailbox to begin with, though. Plus the footage I have of the other 3 mailboxes you destroyed with the same exact car. That got him to shut his mouth, as we both knew he didn't want the police getting involved. And also, it was not like I made an actual weapon or anything, just a way to keep my mailbox a little more securely in the ground. Heck, I could even write a paper about it, and suddenly I was doing something work-related and testing out new ideas. Me, I'm gonna put another mailbox in tomorrow, and I think you know what will happen if you run it over again. I walked away, and shockingly, that revenge was enough to put the male Karen in his place for the time being. I have yet to get sued about the car, and he has been avoiding me ever since. I don't know if he didn't think anybody would fight back or if I jolted him back into reality. Either way, it worked and my mailboxes have finally stopped getting destroyed. I don't know the state of his car, and honestly I don't care if it stays ruined after all the crap he did to me. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I'm curious, if you would have had a neighbor that constantly runs over your mailbox, what would you have done? Would you have instantly reported him to the police? Which in my opinion is probably the best way to engage this. Anyway, if you enjoyed the story, please don't forget to like the video and post a comment if you wish to support me. Thank you so much. And the next one is titled Awful Neighbor. It all started last summer when our neighbor asked if she could use our trash pickup for a small takeout-sized bag. My boyfriend said yes, but within the following weeks she started putting more stuff out on trash day. It got to the point where there was more of her trash on our curb than ours. My boyfriend lied to her and told her that someone reported us and we were at risk of losing our trash service if she did not stop. She was furious and accused the neighbor on the other side of us and threatened him. We should have known them to distance ourselves from this crazy lady. When it became fall, she insisted on burning leaves constantly. She ran out of leaves on her side of the fence, so without telling us, she began burning leaves on our property. My boyfriend confronted her when he caught her, and she said that she knew how to control fires. In late October, while I was at school and my boyfriend was at work, she lit a fire next to her fence and left it. In class, I began to get a bunch of Ring doorbell notifications, which is not uncommon though, so I ignored it until my boyfriend called and asked me why there were firefighters in our yard. I panicked and watched the camera, and there were like 5 fire trucks and firefighters everywhere. I rushed home thinking the worst, that something happened to our house and maybe even our pets. I came home to the smoldering remains of our shed. When she left her fire, it spread to her fence and then her shed and then our shed. Our grass was burned up, almost reaching the house. We had over $20,000 in damages she caused, and then we spoke to a neighbor whose house is positioned behind ours, and he told us that she had ran over to his house when she noticed how far the fire spread and asked him to put out the fire. When he saw the fire, he told me that the fire was so large it reached the top of the trees. She also burned down a significant amount of forested area. He told her she needed to call 911, but she insisted on him putting out the fire because she did not have a burn permit and could get in trouble. He called 911 thankfully, and if my next door neighbor had it her way, we probably would have lost the house as well. After everything was over, we confronted our neighbor and told her that we don't want her on our property ever again, and if she tried anything that we would be going after her for trespassing. She said good riddance and slammed the door in our faces. Now, she has been doing everything in her power to make our lives hell. She's been blasting music so loud we can hear the words and the lyrics through our walls. She has tried multiple times to do this around 3 to 6 AM, and we have called the police on her for not following Michigan noise laws, which go from 8 PM to 8 AM. She has gotten smarter about it though and has started blasting music right at 7 AM on the dot. The police here can take 20 to 40 minutes to get there, and by that point it's already almost 8. Me and my boyfriend are always busy and use our off days to get some sleep, but she is making it impossible. Update: I never thought it would come to this, but after months of dealing with our awful neighbor's behavior, things finally came to a head when the police showed up at her door. It was a typical Friday morning and I was just about to head out to work when I heard a commotion outside. I looked out the window and saw several police cars parked in front of our neighbor's house. I couldn't help but feel a sense of relief as I watched the officers escort our neighbor out of her house in handcuffs. I had a feeling that this day would come, but I never expected it to be so satisfying. As it turned out, our neighbor had been causing trouble all over the neighborhood. She had been stealing packages from people's porches, vandalizing cars, and even starting fires on purpose. The police had finally caught wind of her behavior and had gathered enough evidence to arrest her. I felt a sense of vindication as I watched our neighbor being led away. For months we had been dealing with her erratic behavior, and it had taken a toll on our mental health. We had tried to reason with her, but she was too far gone. As the weeks went by, I noticed a change in the neighborhood. People seemed to be more relaxed, and I could sense a collective sigh of relief. We no longer had to deal with the constant noise and chaos that our neighbor had brought into our lives. It was only when we received the letter in the mail that we learned the full extent of our neighbor's criminal behavior. The letter was from the prosecutor's office, and it outlined the charges that our neighbor was facing. She was being charged with arson, theft, and vandalism, among other things. Reading through the charges, I could not help but feel a sense of anger. How could someone be so destructive and careless? She had caused so much damage and hurt to so many people in the process, but despite my anger, I also felt a sense of closure. Our neighbor was finally being held accountable for her actions, and it was a relief to know that she would not be able to cause any more harm. As the months went by, our neighbor's trial began. It was a long and drawn-out process, but eventually she was found guilty on all charges. She was sentenced to time in prison, and I felt a sense of justice being served. Looking back on the experience, I cannot help but feel grateful for the support of our community. We were all in this together, and it was only by working together that we were able to put an end to our neighbor's destructive behavior. In the end, I learned an important lesson. It's important to stand up for what is right, even if it means going up against someone who is causing trouble. It may not be easy, but it's worth it in the end. And who knows, maybe one day we'll be able to look back on this experience and laugh about it. But for now, I'm just glad that we can finally enjoy some peace and quiet. And yeah, Ripe Stars, I would say that was definitely a true neighbor from hell, and I'm curious, have you ever dealt with a neighbor that was as awful as this one? I would love to hear your story in the comments. And the next one is titled, Getting Rid of a Stupid Karen. Years back, I worked for a large bank in the UK. We all worked on the same floor and in the same department, but within different teams. I was just passing through on a secondment and saw the beginning of this revenge, but was filled in on the aftermath later. One of the teams was run by a woman called Sarah. Sarah was by many measures a good manager, but she had a blind spot. That blind spot was a woman called Helen. Now, when I was in my previous role, I interacted with Helen a fair bit, and she had seemed friendly, but when it came to actually working with her, she was a nightmare. She would tattle, steal ideas and credit, and generally throw you under the bus at any opportunity. I'm not sure why Sarah always protected her, but it soon became a sore point for most people on the floor who had to deal with her. Enter Mike, who was the manager of a small team. Mike could be a bit of a dick, but was still professional and fun to work with. To give you an idea of his character, I found out I was being made redundant, and even though he was not my manager, he heard about it and booked time out to help me with my CV and do interview practice. Shortly after, it was announced that Mike's smaller team was being dissolved and the staff either made redundant or moved to other teams. At the time of the cuts, the economy in the UK was in a bad state and all the banks were looking for efficiencies. He was redeployed and took the vacant manager role under Sarah that Helen had been gunning for. To make matters worse, Helen now reported directly to him. Helen was furious and spent no time in making her discontent known, as she felt she was entitled to the promotion. Unfortunately for her, Mike was wise to her. They had both joined the company around the same time, and so he knew exactly what she was like. He had even had her blame him for her mistakes before. Damn, even the projects she had gotten so much praise for had been work of one of his staff had done. So he started the process of documenting her poor work and attitude to manage her out of the business. Sarah, however, would not allow it. Helen was a high performer in her eyes, and she would not sign off on him getting rid of her. When I left the team, Mike was frustrated with her and was not sure what to do. So, the revenge, I met up with Mike a year later and he shared how he had solved the Helen problem with me because he knew all of the issues I'd had with her. Because Sarah had his hands tied with this, only other option to get Helen out of the team was for her to leave of her own accord. He could not oust her by making her life difficult or she would go to Sarah, so he went the other way. The mother trucker sat through every performance meeting with her for the rest of the year, gritting his teeth and praising her. That then justified him giving her a really high performance rating. He also used his own contacts to find roles in other teams at his grade that he then talked up to Helen. These roles were specifically selected because they specialized in one of the things Helen claimed she was an expert at but had very little real experience in. Basically, roles where he knew she would have the highest chance of crapping the bed. Eventually, she applied for one and he spent several weeks coaching her for the interview. In the company at the time, the interviews were scored off of 3 main factors: performance rating and current role, competency-based interview results, relevant experience. He had done everything he could to make her shine in all 3. So then she took the promotion and within 2 months had quit the bank. He knew she wasn't ready for the responsibility, didn't have the skills, and her poor work ethic would be exposed. Worst case, she would get her crap together and he would still look like the perfect manager to Sarah. And the next one starts like this. My girlfriend at the time had a boss who was always hitting on her. He would buy her things, flirt with her, etc. We hit a rough patch in our relationship and he did everything in his power to win her from me. He was a VP at the company, so he had the money and probably the smooth talking skills. She would bring him up in fights as a comparison. I got sick of it. Me and her ended our 3-year relationship and sure enough, they are dating about a month later. However, he knew that the company was making her work overtime and not paying her and said, "There's nothing I could do about it," when she asked him. And he knew that she was having to take work home, which was a no-no since she was a lingerie designer and was helping her start her own line, which was a conflict of interest to his company. Flashback to a few months earlier, her company has a Christmas party and I meet the CEO. I won't say his name, but it was a name that I remembered for some reason. Now I was pissed. This scumbag basically took my girlfriend from me. I know it was probably for the best because any girl that would fall for that shouldn't be with me anyway, but I'm not thinking that way at the time. I have no ethical hang-ups about revenge and it was time to get some. I realized that her company email had a template, first name last name @company.com, so I figured that the CEO's email address probably had the same format. With all the knowledge I had, it would be a shame not to blindly email the CEO of his company with detailed info about how his VP was putting his company at risk by dating his employees, knowingly breaking employment laws, allowing sensitive materials out into the public, and start a rival company. So that is what I did. I never got a response from the CEO, however, a couple years later I ran into my ex and had a couple of drinks with her. She told me about how bad of a boyfriend he was, how they fought all the time, and how she went off and hit him one night. She got really close to hitting me a couple of times, but I calmly told her that if she laid a hand on me I would hit her back harder than she could ever imagine and would be happy to go to jail for it. She also told me that the problems really started when he lost his job. I asked how that happened and she told me that it was abrupt, but even he did not really know the reason. It was one of those HR-driven, "we are letting you go" type firings. I told her what I did. She was shocked and angry and left the bar without saying another word, but I didn't give a damn. Even the remote possibility that I was the reason why that scumbag got fired and he got my crappy girlfriend who hit him made me feel like $1,000,000 and I would do it again in a heartbeat. And the next one is titled, I led a revolution against our petty HOA board. My wife and I moved into a 64 townhome community that was 10 years old at the time. The HOA board was comprised of 5 members that were original homeowners when the community started and had been the sole board members since the community started. Their sense of entitlement was absolutely crazy. They thrived on their quarterly walkthrough of the neighborhood as they would write up every single home for some kind of violation, regardless of how minor the offenses were. Everyone gets a violation letter. Our first letter, the first month living there, was that our garage door paint was starting to peel. It was a 2 cm scrape where the panels met. It needed to be repainted. The siding needed to be power washed. There was a patch of green moss behind a bush and the sliding door on the deck was dirty. There was dirt on the bottom of the door from recent rain and it needed to be washed. We had 30 days to fix the issues or beginning accruing a fee of $25 a day until they are resolved. I asked around and everyone gets these ridiculously petty letters every quarter. No matter what you did to maintain your townhome, you were going to get a letter about something. As this was going on, none of the major items the neighborhood needed fixed were addressed. After a decade since the construction, the ground had settled unevenly and many homes had standing water issues where it couldn't drain after a storm. The rainwater would sit for 5 to 7 days in people's lawns. And more importantly, there had been a legal fight with the town since the community was started about our road being dedicated, meaning the town was responsible for snow removal. Our HOA dues included paying for our own snow removal, which we shouldn't have to, and we were paying an attorney for 10 years to fight this with no resolution in sight. Fast forwarded 2 years and a few of us had enough and decided to band together to replace the board at the next annual meeting. The existing board got wind of this and hit us all with pages worth of issues with our properties, since if you have outstanding issues, you are not in good standing with the community and thus cannot run for a board position or even vote for those running. This petty move brought the community even closer, and we all spent the weekend before the meeting helping each other clean out their HOA honey-do lists, and we took pictures, documented everything, and then we had the US mail certify delivery of each packet with the completed list and photos to the HOA board, who lived 75 feet away. Come board night, oddly enough, the lawyer was there to give an update that no progress has been made with the township on dedicated our road. He stuck around as we moved to the elections for the next board. We brought our signed petitions to add our names to the ballot. The board says we are not eligible as we have all outstanding issues with our property. We call bullcrap with our receipts from the post office that they received our completed lists with documentation. They reply that they haven't reviewed them yet. We tell them that is not our problem and we are in good standing. Their lawyer, overhearing this, states we are eligible to be on the ballot if we can confirm the issues with our homes were resolved prior to the meeting. The HOA president glares at the lawyer, but the lawyer just shrugs, saying, "The rules are the rules." With the exception of the 5 existing board members voting for themselves/each other, we are voted in nearly unanimously to replace them. I led the revolution because I was tired of the petty BS when there were real problems in the neighborhood. Sadly, the rest of the elected board members vote me as president. I have no idea what I'm doing, but we spent the next few sessions removing all the dumb violations from most of the neighbors. We went through the bylaws to really focus on what is important. What happens next? Ends up that lawyer was a friend of the previous president and was in no hurry to resolve anything as he was enjoying our excessive bill. I notify him if it is not resolved in the next 6 months, we are finding new representation. He was actually good at his job when pressed to do it. He won the case, the town appealed and tried to drag it out. He fast-tracked the appeal as it had been going on for 10 years and we won the appeal too. The town dedicated our road and then the lawyer pressed that it should have been done years ago. It wasn't him slowing things down, but the town. He ends up getting us a settlement from the judge for back pay on us, paying for snow removal that the town was responsible for. We ended up using that settlement to have French drains installed across much of the community to clear the standing water issues. With the money left over, we fixed a lot of the neighborhood issues that the HOA should have been doing the whole time. Fences and sidewalks in disrepair, replaced dead trees and shrubs, etc. It was great getting all that done without having to hit our capital reserve fund. I remained president until we moved a few years ago. Our family began to outgrow the townhome and now we live in a new larger development with a new HOA. I was asked to run for a position on it. I replied, not a damn chance, but I will lead a coup d'etat if I need to. Edit, one minor update on what happened to the former HOA president that I replaced. The original HOA president, 50-year-old male, was not actually eligible to be president. He was not on the mortgage, the townhome was in his mom's name, no one knew because he held the books. The best was at the next annual meeting, he shows up with his petition to try and get his position back. I tell him in front of the other 60+ homeowners that he cannot even be at the meeting, let alone vote or be on a ballot, as his name is not on the property. But his mom is eligible if she wants to. That was embarrassing enough for the entitled little prick. And with this, we have reached the end of the video. However, if you cannot get enough of my content, please check out my endless playlist, where you can find thousands of hours of content. In addition, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel to not miss any of my daily uploads. Thank you so much in advance, and I hope to see you again tomorrow.